Hey, somebody's got to put the net on the goal. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to the Professional Noticer. Here you and I will use common sense and all the wisdom we can muster to move beyond what is true and go all the way to the truth. With actual listeners in more than 100 countries, I'm the Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to some of the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. This week, the Professional Noticer is sponsored by ITAM.org. That's IAITAM.org. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the only global member-based training organization dedicated to producing IT asset management professionals for major corporations. This is an unbelievable organization, and the founder and CEO, Dr. Barb Rimbiesa, is someone you should know. Okay, first you need to understand that Dr. Barb actually created this industry. Again, ITAM is the only global training organization turning out IT asset managers that corporations immediately hire all over the world. So check them out. You can go to school on this with an online program and get a degree that is actually in huge demand. In demand by whom, you wonder? Well, go to IAITAM.org and look through their client list. I'm telling you, it's everybody from Sony Pictures to NASA to the United Nations. To me, it's hilarious that Google is one of their clients. This is not just Google, it's Google, Yahoo, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple. When these people have IT issues, they hire the people that ITAM has trained. That's IAITAM.org. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on the Professional Noticer. And today, I'm bringing you a new friend, a guy that I think you are really going to enjoy. 9 years as a professional basketball player, and that's after being cut several times from the high school team. We'll get that story from him. He's done 4 TED Talks. He's a brand called Working on Your Game, multiple books, and going to talk to us about a new book today that we've got a special price on for you guys, so just hang on here. But please welcome Dre Baldwin. Dre all day. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Andy. Thank you for the introduction. I'm happy to be here.
Man, I'm glad you're here. Where are you? You in Miami?
Yes, Miami, Florida.
All
How about
right.
you?
Oh, I'm here in Orange Beach, Alabama. So just like right next to Miami, you know.
Yeah, close enough.
It's probably the redneck version of Miami.
That's what I've heard.
So, man, when you wanted to be an athlete going into college, but you didn't get a scholarship offer, correct?
Oh, yeah, I was so far from a scholarship offer. There's an opposite of scholarship. That's what I had.
Really? And so what did you do? How did you begin?
Well, coming out of high school, I had, like you said, I got cut from my high school team 3 years in a row. I only played that 1 year, my senior year, which is supposed to be, based on the growth, your best year. I scored 2 points per game my senior year of high school on a basketball team. So for those who don't know basketball, 2 points is not a lot in basketball. Maybe in hockey or soccer is a lot, but in basketball is not a lot. So
right.
No colleges were offering me to be on their teams. I wasn't being recruited. I didn't even get offered like a walk-on offer. Because sometimes a coach can say, hey, we don't have any scholarships left, but you can still come and be on the team. We just can't give you a scholarship. I didn't even have that. I was on nobody's radar. So I had to walk on to the team. So for those who don't know what that means, it means you literally walk into the gym, sight unseen, nobody knows who you are, and you have to prove yourself from the ground up. And I didn't really have a problem with that. I would love to be a scholarship player and then having laid out the red carpet, of course, Andy. But being that sports is a performance-based business, it's not really based on anybody's opinion. It's really based on what you do on the court. I knew as long as I could get on the court and get a chance to show what I could do, if I get in there and there's 15 people better than me, fine, I'll walk away fair and square. I'm not good enough. But if I get in there and I can prove my game, then I would get an opportunity. So that's what happened. I walked on in college and actually became a starter my freshman year of college, believe it or not, after sitting on the bench in high school. So sometimes things just happen, ironically like that. Didn't set the world on fire in college, but I had a college basketball career based on that. And then later on went to the pros, but I'm sure we'll get to that part.
Yeah, I'm just, the metaphor for life, just what you described right there. I mean, here you had basically a non-existent high school
Right.
career, and yet some people would say, okay, were you confident or were you just insane? I mean, what made you think, yeah, I can walk on and make the team? How did you, what are you saying to yourself?
That's a great question that you posed there, Andy. I know you said it in jest, but it's actually a great one because a lot of people have that question. What's the difference between a high level of confidence or just complete delusion, right? Is it confident if you haven't reached the goal yet? Should you keep trying because you're confident and then you reach it? Or are you delusional and you should give it up because you're not going to reach it? The answer to the question is it depends on the end of the story, because that determines whether you were a delusional idiot who should have quit a long time ago, or you were this visionary who saw it before everybody else saw it. So when I made it in basketball, I became a visionary because I made it. Now, let's say I didn't make it. Let's say I walked on in college and I didn't make the team and I didn't play for it. I didn't play at all in college. And my basketball career ended with me scoring 2 points per game in high school. And that's all I did. I would have been a delusional fool for having put all that time into basketball, depending on how you look at it. So it really depends on how somebody is looked at overall. Posterity's sake is based on the end of the story. So if the end of the story makes you win, then the rest of the story all looks like it was just all built up to this great climax. But if you lose, then you did all of that for nothing, based on the way that you look at it. Now, of course, there's a lot of nuance involved in that. But to answer your question, Andy, what did I say to myself? It was something that I couldn't have put into words at age 18, but I can explain now, is that sports is a performance-based business. As long as I get the chance to perform and you get to see me and I'm being judged fairly, which is what happened, then I can accept it if somebody's better than me. But if I'm one of the better players, then I get my shot, and that's exactly what happened. And it's the great thing about sports, Andy, as opposed to, the thought leadership world or the author world or the speaking world is not really subjective. It's not really based on how people feel about you. It's based on those numbers you put up. Who's good, who's not. I mean, if the ball goes in the basket, you score. If you miss, you don't score. It's black and white like that.
That's really good. And I think, there's a lot to be said for it depends on the end of the story. Now, I know you've written a lot of books. Right. I've written a bunch of books. And the majority of the books that I've had the easiest time with, there's been a couple that I've struggled with, but the majority of them, I kind of knew where I was going because I knew the ending when I started. I knew the end of the story. I knew what it was. Right. And I knew, I think that has something to do with, with your confidence level at that time. You knew that you were going to write the end of that story.
That's right.
And so when that happened, when you got involved there, and then so now you're was this a Division I college? Was this what?
That was Division III.
Division III. Okay.
College basketball. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm sure it's kind of a disconnect. I'm sure it's a disconnect for everybody. It's like, okay, no high school career except for senior year, 2 points a game, walk on at a Division III college, 9 years as a pro. Okay, so how did that happen? What happened?
Right. Wow. Well, one thing you can say is that I was definitely a late bloomer when it came to sports. I didn't start playing basketball until about age 14. I was always into sports, but I didn't focus on basketball until about 14. So that's late for anybody who's trying to play in college, let alone play professionally. So I did bloom a little bit later than most people. But when I got out of college, just to put a timeline on this to everyone, Andy, I graduated from college in 2004. So I worked a couple of the quote unquote regular jobs my first year out of school. I worked at Foot Locker. I worked at Bally Total Fitness, selling memberships and selling sneakers. And then what I did, Andy, is I needed to get seen. Now, I'm trying to play professional basketball overseas. I wasn't trying to play for the New York Knicks or the New Orleans Pelicans. I'm trying to play overseas. Now, I've never been out of the country.
That's a big deal. I mean, look at all the NBA players that came from the overseas game.
Exactly. So here's the challenge is that I can't just walk into a gym overseas because I'm not over there. So for those teams to even know that I exist, I needed to do something to get them to even recognize my existence. So in the pro basketball world, we have these events called exposure camps. Now, for those who don't know what an exposure camp is, it's basically like a job fair, but for athletes. But instead of you just showing up and talking about what you can do, you actually bring your sneakers and you play and you prove what you can do. So these decision makers, these decision makers from all over the world, from Australia, from Germany, from France, they fly to the USA and they come specifically to come to these events so they can scout talent and see who they want to sign to their company. I mean, this is a business. So I went to one of these exposure events. It was in Orlando, Florida. I drove from Philadelphia to Orlando. It was about a 19-hour drive overnight. And we got there and I did my thing. It was a 2-day event. We played 2 games each day. I did pretty well at that exposure camp. And from that camp experience, they gave me the footage from the games that I played in, because as opposed to my college career where I was playing against Division III players, at the exposure camp, you're playing against professional level players, guys who are already pro or guys who want to become pro. So this is a better competition. So you look better because you're playing against people who are better. Right. That footage, I leveraged that. I started calling basketball agents. So for those who don't know how the basketball world works, an agent in basketball is the same as an agent in the literary world or in the modeling world or in acting. They're the go-between. They're the middleman between the jobs and the talent. So I started pitching myself to agents because no agent was calling me. Because again, I'm coming out of a D3. It's not like I was scoring 30 points a game. I was okay, but I wasn't amazing. So I had to call the agents myself and say, hey, Mr. Agent, Mrs. Agent, could you represent me? And my collateral was I had to sell myself to them, right? And I sold them by saying, I went to this exposure camp. Here's the scouting report that some independent third party, this is what they say about me. Now, of course, I look good on the scouting report. And here's the footage. Here's the proof that I can actually play. So those 2 things were my collateral. So I used those to get an agent to be willing to represent me. And I finally got one agent to represent me. I sent an email about 60 agents. I sent my footage to about 20 of them who responded. And one out of that 20, out of that whole funnel, one out of that 20 wanted to represent me. And that agent is who helped me get started in professional basketball. But as far as the development, it was just continually working on my game, which is what my brand is all about. I kept practicing. I believed in myself that I can make it happen. I just knew I needed an opportunity to show my game. And I'll tell you one last thing to wrap this up. When you get to that exposure camp, you got to understand there are 200 players there. And every one of those 200 is trying to do the same thing, to impress somebody so they get an opportunity to play professional basketball. So this thing is like a meat market. So you imagine you're playing a team sport like basketball, but everybody's trying to be the star because they all want to look good. So it's a delicate balance that you have to balance it because you don't want to look selfish, but you have to be selfish at the same time. Right? So I did pretty well there. I got a couple highlight plays that made people remember me. But I'll tell you, Andy, and this is something that I tell players all the time, that all those years of me practicing and then all the years that happened after, the crux of it was those 2 days in Orlando. Because if I had not performed well in those 2 days, then nothing that happened after would have happened because I never would have signed a contract. Right. And if I didn't perform well in those 2 days, nobody would care about the story that you've asked me about so far, which is when I started in high school, sat on the bench, walked on in college. That wouldn't be a story because it didn't come to a happy conclusion. Nobody would care how you did it. So that's what I mean when I say whether you're a visionary or delusional depends on the end of the story. Yeah. And you were writing it as you went along because there many times as those agents said, no, we pass, you could have very easily said, wow, okay, so 20 of them have passed, this many have passed. But you were remembering, I'm sure, it only takes one agent. You only need one. It doesn't matter how many of them pass. It only takes one. Absolutely. My book, The Traveler's Gift, was turned down by 51 publishers. And, looking back, I mean, that's still the best-selling book that I have. And it would have been very easy at any time during those 3.5 years to say, I must be delusional. Because 51 publishers said that what I had written wasn't worth putting on paper, And so
It's very cool to listen to you talk about looking back at that time and knowing what you have going now. Because at that time, you had to really work on your game. And now that has become literally your brand.
Right.
You work on your game. And this is, what you did to make yourself valuable has now become what you do to help people create value in themselves. And
Right.
so work on your game. Tell us about that brand. Tell us how you take that and what you do with people. I know that there are four major cornerstones to this, and I'd love to prompt you on those and hear a little bit about each.
Sure. So the way that actually came about was I was publishing videos on YouTube, and this is around the time that I started my pro career. And I'd
You
only put a
you
video
and
on YouTube.
Justin Bieber, man.
Yeah, me and Justin Bieber. That's right. And he got a little bit more famous than me, but I did okay.
So
And
far, the end of the story
yeah,
has not been
that's
written
right. It's not
yet. So
over. All right, but Justin's a little bit younger than me, so he has a little bit of an advantage. But we'll see. We'll see. But as far as me, I started putting videos on YouTube, not because I was trying to get known, because there was nothing to gain from being famous on YouTube in 2006. So I put the video up on YouTube just because I had this exposure camp footage. I just wanted to save it somewhere. But basketball players started finding it. So I said, okay, it looks like people need this. People want to learn how to practice basketball because nobody's teaching it. So I was the first athlete in any sport putting the workouts on the internet for free. So after a few years of me doing this, I'm still playing overseas ball at this time. Players just started asking me about my approach because they just saw how consistent I was. And they're looking at me like, oh, I never heard of this guy. I never seen him on TV, but he looks like he really knows how to play. And he's consistently coming in here. Who is this guy? So they just started asking me questions like, what keeps you coming to the gym every day? Why do you do it? Or, Dre, I see that and I started to tell them a little bit of my story just in the comments. I would just reply to comments and tell them, hey, I walked on in college. I got cut from my high school team. So they started asking, Dre, how do you have the same confidence in the game that you have in practice? Because, everybody's watching in the game. Or why'd you keep playing when you got cut from your high school team 3 years in a row? Or how'd you get started getting known on the internet? Because by around 2008, 2009, this is the early days of influencing. And now people are like, oh, I want to be on the internet because I can become known. I can get famous. So they want to know about that. Or how'd you even get started playing overseas? How do you do it? Because most people have no idea how to play professional basketball overseas. So I started answering these questions, and unbeknownst to me, I was laying the foundation for this whole framework called work on your game. Now we do it on
right,
purpose, but back then it was by accident. The
sure,
four principles: discipline, show up every day, do the work; confidence, put yourself out there boldly and authentically; mental toughness, keep showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved; and personal initiative, go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And I mean, just in this short amount of conversation we've had so far, Andy, I mean, you could kind of tell through my story, that's exactly what I was doing. I
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
codify it until later, but that's what I was doing. And that's what we help people do now. So we work with, of course, we have athletes in our audience, but I work actually mostly with business professionals and entrepreneurs about
sure,
taking those same mental tools that the athlete needs, because a lot of what we do in sports, at least the mental side of it, maybe not the physical, but the mental side is directly parallel to the work world and the business world, especially nowadays when so many people kind of have this freedom to be whoever they want to be, do what they want, and we don't have as many gatekeepers. But it actually makes it kind of more challenging for people because now they don't have anyone above them telling them to do it. They had to do it on their own. They had to run on their own energy. And not everybody has that initiative. So when
right.
people
If
know that
that,
they need that, I'm the type of person they look for.
yeah, that discipline, that personal initiative, both of those things, man, and it's obvious to see those in you, and so I to me, it's very interesting. I told a coach several years ago, I was kind of figuring something out too. And I told him, I said, nobody knows how to do this better than you do. Nobody in the world knows better. You're in the conversation for best of all time. But when you begin to know why what you do works as it does, it'll be a different day because you'll be able to use these principles in areas that most people don't even recognize that they work. And that's kind of what I see that you did, because you knew how. You found a way. It's what I talk about sometimes about finding a way where there is no way. Well, when do you have to find a way when there is no way? Well, pretty much when everybody says there's no way. Now you got to find a way. But you did that. But not only did you do that, you figured out why it worked as it did. And so you've been able to transfer everything you've learned not only into another industry, but for the benefit of other people.
That's right. That's what the whole thing is.
This new book that you have out, I'm very excited about that. I'm very grateful to you for coming on today and allowing this for our listeners, and for all of you out there listening and watching on the multiple platforms here. I just want you to know that Dre's new book is called The Mirror of Motivation, and he is giving one to you. All you have to do is pay for the shipping. But how do they take advantage of this very generous offer, Dre?
Sure. And again, like you said, it's The Mirror of Motivation. Got the book right here in front of me. All you do is cover a small shipping charge. You just go to mirrorofmotivation.com. Just the title of the book, without the word the. Mirrorofmotivation.com. You cover the shipping. We will ship that to you worldwide, anywhere that you live. And that's it. That's all you got to do to take advantage of it. Okay.
We'll put that in the show notes too. That'll be down, and how to contact you. Couple more questions. One I have is, if you were to go back or be able to have a 90-second phone call with your 18-year-old self, and knowing what you know now, looking at yourself at 18, what would you tell yourself? What would you say to watch out for? What would you say not to do? What would you say to make sure you do again? What would you say to your 18-year-old self?
I would tell myself to take more chances / risks, or the things that we see as chances or risks, because most of them are really not. We have just spooked ourselves into thinking that they're risky, so we don't do them. So I would say anything that I would look back on my 18-year-old self that I'm like mad that it happened that way is something that I did not do. I don't regret anything that I actually did, even the things that didn't work out, because at least I got a story to tell. But it's the things that you don't do. Those are the things that will gnaw at you for the rest of your life. The other thing is invest in personal development as early as possible. I didn't know what personal development was. That's what I do now, literally, but I didn't know what it was. Didn't know it was a specific thing, where it was just about this material to help you get better. I didn't know it existed. Nobody ever told me until I was maybe 21, 22 years old that existed. And the other thing is just learn how to sell yourself, because nobody knew in the year 2000 when I turned 18, nobody knew the internet, nobody knew this was going to exist. And when this comes about, the main thing is you have to be able to get people's attention and keep their attention. And if you're able to sell yourself, then you're able to do that. And then that leads to the next step and the next step. So those three things: take more action, don't sit on your hands, invest in personal development, and learn how to sell yourself.
That's great. There's an old saying that you reminded me of when you talked about not regretting any of the things you did. You regretted the things you didn't do. And that old saying is something like, you will pay a price in your life. You will either pay the price of discipline, or you will pay the price of regret. One or the other. And so you seem to have been a model of discipline. Have there been people in your life that, I guess for lack of a better word, they were naysayers, they were people that just thought you were foolish for doing it, that you probably hadn't thrown it in their face, but you do feel just gratified or relieved, or a sense of pride in what you've been able to accomplish? I mean, what were some of those instances like? Because it sounds, what you went through sounds as unlikely as what I went through. You know, I wanted to be
Right.
a speaker, I wanted to be a writer, and I was living under a pier. And so it sounds very unlikely. So what were kind of the things that people said to you, and what were you thinking?
Well, I'll give you a great example, and it actually is both sides of the coin. So when it comes to the discipline, I would have to credit as a role model. I had to credit my parents because I saw them every day get up and go to work, and they never preached about it. But I followed that when I wanted to play basketball. I wanted to learn how to play. Well, I saw them get up and go to work every day, so I just went to the playground every day with the ball and let me figure out how to play basketball.
Went to work.
And the funny thing is, right, the funny thing is when I graduated from college, now from a D3 school, I have this undecorated background. I get back home from college and my parents say, okay, you have a degree now, son, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to be a professional basketball player. And my mom was like looking at me like I was crazy. And she's like, what? Because she knew she knew the whole story. She's my parents.
Right,
So she
sure.
saw everything. Right. She saw all the B-roll, the stuff, the non-highlight stuff. So she's like, how are you going to be a basketball player? She's like, well, do you have an agent? Do you have any prospects? Do you have a plan? Do you have a strategy? Do you have a job offer? And the answers to all those questions were no. And she logically and reasonably just destroyed that whole idea. She said, well, if you don't have any prospects, she doesn't know anything about sports, but she was just asking reasonable questions. Anybody says they're going to get a certain job, but they have no plan on getting it. That doesn't make any sense. And you're talking to a college graduate. So she was kind of just talking sense into me. And it upset me that she said what she said, not even so much that she said it because she was being completely accurate. It was the fact that the truth was the truth. That was what it was. And then in one of my books, Work on Your Game, I actually write about that whole conversation and what happened and the fact that I wasn't mad at her or mad at my parents for seeing what they saw because what they saw was 100% reality. I was the one being delusional at the time. I used that as the thing to push against because what I find, especially with athletes and our mentality of competitiveness is we do our best work when we have something to push against. We need an enemy. We need a target. So my target was this reality that I've done absolutely nothing in basketball to think that I could play pro, but I knew I had the ability, but I hadn't proven it. So the only person who believed it was me. So what my target was fighting against that reality. And another one was just, from my neighborhood growing up, you get cut from your high school team 3 years in a row. Now you're trying out again. And then you sit on the bench the 1 year that you play, everybody's like, okay, when are you going to give this up and be a little bit more realistic? And it wasn't any one individual person, but it was just the very concept. Like, okay, I'm going to compete against this concept because reality is everything that they're saying. They weren't lying. They weren't making anything up. This is true. I only played 1 year. I only scored 2 points a game. I was sitting on the bench. I had no college offers. All of that was 100% factual. So I was fighting against the facts and the reality to change it and make it into the world that I wanted it to be.
This is really good. So tell me, what was the conversation like? Was it a phone call to your mom when you signed your first pro contract? It was in person?
Oh, when I signed?
Yeah, when you signed your first pro contract, was it a phone call?
No, it actually was I was still in the United States. I'm from Philadelphia, so I was living at my parents' house at this time. So this was a year after graduation, and I signed. My agent called me and said, the deal's done. We're getting you a flight I played in Lithuania. That was where I started. And I told my parents, hey, I got a contract. I need to fly out in 3 days to Lithuania. And they were probably actually pretty happy because they wanted to get this grown man out of their house. So they were happy.
Didn't really care where Lithuania was, did they?
Yeah, exactly. They just knew I was leaving. They said, all right, congratulations, son.
Wow.
I'll be taken to the airport.
Good grief. Okay, so last question. Here's the last question for you. Let's say there is a 14-year-old right now that's listening to this. So his dad or his mom said, "Hey, come here. You need to listen to this." And what are you saying to him? Because this kid is wavering. This kid is not sure whether he should continue or whether he should listen to other people. He's not sure. He's 14. He's not developed physically. He's not developed mentally. I mean, you know how that is. And so what is it that you say to this kid right now?
Number one thing I would say to that kid is to look at what vision is coming up in your mind. As long as you can still see that vision, that means you need to keep going. As soon as that vision disappears from your mind, you can't see it anymore, then it's time for you to move on to something else. Because what happened to me, Andy, when I got cut from the high school team that third year in a row, that's when most people would say, okay, now I'm really giving it up. I'm done. And I initially said that to myself, and I tried to reconstruct in my mind, because I had always done this visualizing of my future even before I knew what it was. I was trying to reconstruct in my mind, what else can I do, since it's obviously not going to be sports, because sports keeps failing. Maybe I can be a really good student. No, that wasn't going to work. Maybe I could be a rapper. No, I don't have talent for rap. So I was trying to come up with some other vision, something that could give me like some kind of compass for the reason I'm going to get up and go to school and do my thing every day. But it kept coming back to basketball, which made no sense to me, because you saw what just happened in basketball. I just failed again. But it kept coming back up and coming back up. So I decided to give it another try, and then the rest became history. So what I would say to that 14-year-old kid is, especially in the world that we're in now, Andy, where we are being inundated with messages from everyone other than ourselves, is you have to really stay in touch with what you say. It's cool to take in what other people say. You can listen to what Dre says, listen to what Andy says, listen to what your parents say. But in the end, the only person going to be responsible for what you do with your life is you, even though you're only 14 right now. What do you say? What are you seeing in your mind for yourself? And it's a big challenge these days with younger people, because a lot of times they think what they're saying is not really what they're saying. It's just what's been banged into their mind by the social media feeds and whatever they're listening to or watching all day, every day, because we're on these things all day. Now, I think a generation maybe younger than you, Andy, but I grew up in an era where we didn't have that problem. I mean, we see it as an advantage, but we didn't have that problem, where most of the time we were by ourselves. But nowadays, you always have something to distract you, another person's voice in your ear. And sometimes you have to disconnect from that and get back in touch with the voice inside of you, because this is something I talked about in one of my other books, Work on Your Game. I think everyone who's listening to this sings in the shower, or you have heard yourself singing, right? And when you listen to a recording of yourself, for example, when we listen back to this recording, my voice sounds completely different when I listen to the video than how it sounds right now in my mind while I'm talking. And I always wondered why that was. And I heard this guy say this. He said that when you listen to something through earphones or on a computer, the sound is traveling through airwaves, right? It travels through the air to get to you. But when you speak and you hear it, the sound is traveling through bone. And bone conducts sound differently than air conducts sound. So what I tell people is the metaphor is that, yes, you are hearing things all day coming through the air, but the voice you really need to listen to is the one that's coming through the bones, the one that is your voice, what you are saying to yourself. That is the voice that matters more than anyone else. It's 10 times more important than anything anybody else says, no matter who they are. So when you hear the voice coming through the bones, that's the one that you need to follow.
Dude, that is so good. Man, that is so good. All right. I said I was only going to ask you one more, but have you got time for one more? Just one more.
As many as you want.
All right. Well, I got one more. How important, yeah, because you said this is, this social media stuff and our phones, these are distractors. And I agree. I grew up ADD. I mean, I'm ADD. And so now, okay, you're ADD. Let me give you something else to distract you. Yeah, thanks a lot. And so my question for you is, how important is it to you to create quiet time?
It's important to me because I'm a type of person who I do a lot of creating, and I do a lot of giving my message to other people, not even to myself, but to other people. And I'm always taking in order to give out, you have to take something in. It's important to me because my brain would feel like it's fried if I'm taking in too much stuff and I don't give myself space. So I always make time for meditation at the very beginning of my day. I do not get on no email or social media until I've already meditated, done yoga, exercised, drink water. Then I'll see because when you get on your phone, you're looking at everybody else's agenda. Your
Right.
email is everybody else's, your text messages, anything on social media is what somebody else wanted to say. Even if they're commenting on your stuff, is what they have to say. So
Right.
I try to make sure that, or I do make sure that the beginning of my day and the end of my day is not anybody else's agenda, is my agenda.
I do the same thing without the yoga. without the yoga. But I do the same thing. I get up and it's that specific to the quiet I don't check email. I don't text because you're right. That's once I'm on that, there goes my mind, And so, buddy, thank you so much. How again can we reach you? And just go over one more time about how they can get the book, and we'll put all this on the show notes. But how do we get you?
Well, my main homepage is dreallday.com is my website, if you couldn't guess. I'm on all the social media platforms. Anyone that you like, just look up my name, Dre Baldwin. My name on there will either be Dre Baldwin or Dre All Day. Like Andy said, the links will be down there. This book, Mirror of Motivation, the subtitles, the self-guide, the self-discipline. You have goals. You're willing to do the work. The question you need to ask is, who do I need to be? This book gives you the framework to answer that question. Who do I need to be? All you do is cover a small shipping charge. We'll ship this to you worldwide. Mirrorofmotivation.com.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you. We'll keep in touch, and you keep in touch with us. I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Andy.
I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, smile while you talk. It's not time to breathe anybody else's air yet, but do make sure you have a positive answer to the question, how's it going? And so, until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Sparklers provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by the Christmas Candy Recycling Center. Located in the heart of New York City, the Christmas Candy Recycling Center has been thriving now for more than 6 decades. In fact, our records show a probability of 84% that the peppermint candy canes you ate this season have been recycled 4 times and are slightly more than 23 years old. That you have consumed recycled candy during Christmas has been a statistical fact for every man, woman, and child since 2008. But now you're wondering if you can cash in. The answer is yes, and thank goodness it's as simple as taking candy from a baby. First, when Christmas is over, take candy from any baby and gather up all the unused or half-eaten treats in your house or yard. Then UPS or FedEx your leftover candy to 762 14th Street, New York, New York. The Christmas Candy Recycling Center is paying 4 cents a pound for unused candy canes, up to 6 cents a pound for white chocolate, and so far, divinity prices are skyrocketing. Plain stale divinity is bringing 19 cents a pound, slightly more if it has been made with red or green food coloring, and 23 cents per pound if it includes chopped pecans. As always, the Christmas Candy Recycling Center will reimburse you with cash, exchange of product, or tickets to visit our reindeer testing facility. That's the Christmas Candy Recycling Center of New York.